Chapter 1. The Note and the Bag. Friday afternoons always carried a strange mixture of peace and ache for Thomas Vaughn. Peace because he got to walk his daughter to her mother's car and see her face light up at the idea of a fun weekend. Ache because he would spend the next 2 days checking his phone for pictures, updates, anything that reminded him she was still his little girl even when she wasn't under his roof. The school parking lot was half empty, wind tossing leaves across the asphalt. Emma clung to his hand tightly, swinging her little backpack with every skip. She was 7, old enough to be independent, young enough to still cling. Her shoes flashed with pink lights every few steps. "Dad, can we get ice cream on Sunday night when you pick me up?" she asked, tilting her head with the kind of calculated sweetness only a kid could get away with. Thomas chuckled. "If you eat real dinner first." "Real dinner is overrated," Emma declared. "Tell that to your doctor." She smiled, but her eyes kept flickering toward the silver SUV idling at the curb. Kathy, her mother, was inside, scrolling her phone. She didn't look up. Thomas squeezed Emma's hand gently. "You okay?" "Yeah." She nodded quickly, almost too quickly. He'd learned how to read her small hesitations over years of shared breakfasts and bedtime stories. Something was bothering her, but she wasn't ready to say it out loud. That happened sometimes when she knew her grandmother, Kathy's mother, would be around. They reached the SUV. Kathy finally looked up with a tight smile. "You're late." "It's 4:00 exactly," Thomas said calmly. "Well, Emma likes being early." Emma didn't say anything. She just hugged Thomas, arms tight around his waist. He bent down and wrapped her up, breathing in the faint scent of her strawberry shampoo, a smell that always hit him like a memory of better years. "You be good, kiddo," he murmured. "I'm always good," she whispered into his ear. "Just remember to read your pockets." He frowned at that, but didn't have time to ask. She pulled back, gave him the tiniest nod, something heavy behind her eyes, then climbed into the back seat. The SUV pulled away. Emma waved through the window until they turned onto the main road and disappeared behind traffic. The parking lot suddenly felt too quiet. Thomas shoved his hands into his jacket pockets to keep warm, and his fingers brushed something soft. Paper, folded several times. His heartbeat stumbled. He pulled it out. Emma's handwriting, blocky letters, uneven lines. "Dad, don't read until I'm gone." Well, she was gone now. He unfolded it. "Dad, check under your bed tonight. Grandma hid something there yesterday." For a moment, he didn't breathe. The wind blew around him, but the world felt still. Silent. His pulse hammered painfully in his ears. "Grandma hid something under my bed?" His throat tightened. He managed to get to his car, though he didn't remember walking there. The door slammed shut, but even inside the cabin, he could still feel his heart pounding as if the note were alive in his hand, radiating fear. Under his bed? His ex-mother-in-law? Hiding something? Thomas wasn't the type to panic easily. 15 years teaching chemistry to teenagers had built up a tolerance to chaos. But this was different. This was Emma. Emma never lied. Emma never exaggerated. She didn't even cheat at board games. Something was wrong. He drove home faster than he should have. Every red light felt like an accusation. Every turn felt too slow. His house looked normal when he pulled into the driveway. Brown siding, white trim, a yard he never had time to mow properly. Nothing out of place. Nothing to indicate that something under his bed could destroy his life. He unlocked the front door and stepped inside. Silence. Stillness. He set his keys down, shut the door quietly, and read the note again, as if hoping the words would change. They didn't. He made his way down the hallway, his palms sweating, footsteps echoing louder than usual. It was absurd. He had lived here for years, but suddenly the space felt foreign, like he had stepped inside someone else's home. He entered his bedroom. Everything looked untouched. The slightly messy desk, the laundry basket he kept forgetting to empty, the bed he never bothered to make on Fridays. But the bed now felt like a threat. He swallowed hard. Okay. Calm down." His voice sounded thin, even to himself. He knelt beside the mattress. For a moment he hesitated, staring at the fabric as if pulling it up would trigger some trap he couldn't see. Then he exhaled and lifted the mattress with both hands. The sight hit him like a punch to the chest. A black duffel bag. Heavy. Zipped. Stuffed to capacity. That's not possible, he whispered, his voice cracking. His first instinct was denial. Maybe it was old camping gear. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe his hands moved on their own. He unzipped it. The smell hit him first, chemical, sharp, familiar from school safety demonstrations. Then the sight. Clear plastic bags, filled with crystalline shards, layer after layer. He recognized it instantly. Methamphetamine. High purity. High volume. This wasn't personal use. This wasn't someone's stash. This was distribution level. Enough to bury him under decades of prison time. His stomach twisted violently. He staggered back, catching himself on the edge of the bed frame before he hit the floor. No, 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 no. He pressed a shaking hand over his mouth. Images flooded his mind. Police cars, handcuffs, trials he couldn't win. Emma pulled away crying, people whispering that the quiet high school chemistry teacher was secretly a drug dealer. He felt sick. He forced himself to breathe. He needed proof, evidence that it wasn't his, that he didn't put it there. His phone was already in his hand. He took pictures from every angle. The bag under the bed, the contents, the surrounding area. He recorded a video, narrating the time, date, and what he found. His voice shook violently on the recording. He backed away from the bag and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at it like it was a venomous snake. "What were you thinking, Bernice?" he whispered. "What did you do?" His hands trembled as he dialed 3 numbers. 911. The operator answered calmly. 911. What's your emergency? Thomas swallowed, throat dry. My name is Thomas Vaughn. I found a large quantity of illegal narcotics in my home. I think someone planted them. I need police immediately. Sir, are you in danger? I don't know, he said honestly, but my daughter left me a note. She said her grandmother hid something under my bed. There was a pause on the line, the kind that meant this is bad. We're dispatching officers now. Do not touch the bag. Do not move anything. Stay where you are. Yes, ma'am. His voice felt very far away. He hung up and stared at the wall, trying not to imagine flashing lights, neighbors watching from windows, or Emma's face if he disappeared behind bars. A chill crawled through him. Tonight was going to be the worst night of his life. Chapter 2, Police, CPS, and Bernice's Shadow. Thomas stood in the hallway, arms crossed tightly, every muscle locked as if bracing against a storm he couldn't see. The house felt too quiet, as though even the walls understood something catastrophic had entered. The first flashing lights bounced off his living room windows only 15 minutes after the 911 call. The crunch of tires on gravel sent a cold shiver through him. He stepped outside to meet them. 2 patrol cars. 4 officers. One stepped forward, tall, broad-shouldered, hand resting near his holster. Are you Thomas Vaughn? Yes, Thomas breathed. You reported narcotics on site? Ah, yes. Inside. Under my bed. His voice cracked on the last word. The officer's eyes softened slightly. We'll need to take a look. Thomas nodded and stepped aside, letting them enter. He followed as they swept the hallway. When they reached the bedroom, one officer lifted the mattress while another knelt beside the duffel bag. Jesus, the kneeling officer muttered. Thomas watched helplessly as the officer unzipped the bag and revealed the crystal-filled packets he'd already seen. The police officer didn't need training to recognize what it was. His expression tightened. He turned back to Thomas. Sir, this is a lot. Do you understand how serious this is? I didn't put it there, Thomas said immediately, almost pleading. I swear to you, I didn't. The officer exchanged a glance with his partner. We hear that every day, the partner said. Thomas swallowed. My daughter left me a note. She said her grandmother hid something under my bed yesterday. That stopped them. The first officer straightened. Your daughter? And her grandmother? Tell us exactly what she said. Thomas handed them the folded note he'd kept in his pocket. The officer read it slowly, eyebrows climbing as he took in the childlike handwriting. Check under your bed. Grandma hid something. He read aloud. His partner crossed his arms. When was your last contact with the grandmother? Yesterday, Thomas said. She came with my ex-wife. They dropped off clothes for Emma. Did she go inside the house? Yes. For how long? 5 minutes. Maybe less. Long enough for this. He gestured to the bag with a trembling hand. The officers exchanged another look, But this one was different. Concerned. Calculating. Mr. Vaughn, the first officer said, "We need to ask you some direct questions. You understand, right?" "Yes. And you're not under arrest," he added, "but we need the truth." "I'm telling you the truth." "All right," the officer said gently. "Do you use drugs?" "Any kind." "No." "Do you sell?" "Know anyone who does?" "No." "Any reason someone want to frame you?" Thomas exhaled a heavy breath. "Yes." "Who?" He hesitated only long enough for the anger to flare behind his ribs. "My ex-mother-in-law, Bernice Wright." The name felt sour in his mouth. The officer's brow creased. "Why would she frame you with distribution-level narcotics?" Thomas let out a bitter laugh. "Because she's hated me since the day I married her daughter. Because she wanted the divorce to destroy me. Because she wants full custody of my daughter, and she knows framing me with drugs would do it." One officer scribbled notes. Another photographed the bag. Another called dispatch for narcotics detection and crime scene investigators. A fourth officer approached him. "Sir, we're obligated to notify CPS." Thomas's stomach dropped as if the floor vanished beneath him. "What?" he whispered. "Whenever drugs are found in a home where a child lives, even part-time, Child Protective Services has to evaluate the situation. But she wasn't even here. She's with her mother. Doesn't matter. The law is the law." Thomas ran a hand through his hair. Please don't do this. This wasn't me. You have the note. You have the time frame. You have, sir," the officer said softly, "I'm sorry. But that's how this works." Thomas didn't respond. He just stared at his bedroom door, jaw clenching hard enough to ache. Within minutes, 2 crime scene techs entered wearing gloves. They dusted for prints, bagged the duffel, sealed every packet, and took more pictures than Thomas thought necessary. Each click of the camera lens made the situation feel more permanent. Finally, the lead officer approached him again. "Mr. Vaughn, based on what we've gathered so far, here's what will happen. We're taking the bag as evidence. A detective will follow up with you. You're not under arrest at this time, but we need you to stay available. Of course, I'm not running anywhere. CPS will be contacting you tonight or tomorrow. They'll want to interview you and assess your home." Thomas exhaled shakily. "I understand." The officer paused. "Do you have somewhere you can stay? In case the investigation requires additional procedures." "This is my home. I understand that. But I'm giving you a heads up. CPS often makes temporary recommendations about child environments." "You mean they could suspend my visitation?" The officer didn't answer. His silence was answer enough. A knock sounded at the front door. Another uniformed woman stepped inside, holding a clipboard, CPS. Thomas's chest tightened, like someone had tied a belt around it. "Mr. Vaughn," she said politely, "my name is Denise Holson with Child Protective Services. I'm here because we received an urgent call from law enforcement." "That was fast," Thomas muttered. "We respond quickly when drugs are found in a child's living space. May we speak?" He nodded numbly and led her to the dining table. She sat across from him, hands folded on the clipboard. "Mr. Vaughn, I understand this is distressing, but I need to ask you some difficult questions. I'll answer anything. Is your daughter present in the home?" "No. She's with her mother for weekend visitation." "And how often does she sleep here?" "Half the week during normal custody." Denise scribbled notes. "Mr. Vaughn, until this investigation is complete, I'm required to submit a temporary recommendation." The words that followed felt like daggers. "Your visitation with your daughter will be suspended until we confirm the environment is safe." Thomas felt his entire body lock up. "Suspended? It is not a judgment of guilt," she said carefully. "Simply a precaution." He leaned forward, voice low and strained. "My daughter warned me. She left me a note. She said her grandmother hid the bag. This is a setup. You have to understand. I read the note," she said gently. "But we must still follow procedure." He closed his eyes. That's when the ache turned into anger. His fear crystallized into focus. Bernice did this. Bernice put that bag under his bed. Bernice used Emma. Bernice wanted him gone. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't coincidence. This was a deliberate attack. When Thomas opened his eyes again, the fear was still there, but another emotion had taken root beneath it. Resolve. Denise stood and gave him a sympathetic nod. "We'll stay in contact. Please remain available." The officers left. The flashing lights faded. The house grew quiet again, and in the silence, Thomas whispered into the empty room. She set me up. Chapter 3. Thomas and Joseph investigate Bernice. Thomas didn't sleep that night. He lay awake on the couch, staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment Emma's note slipped into his hand. His own daughter, 7 years old, had saved him from walking straight into a felony trap. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that note, her handwriting, the childish, uneven letters. Dad, check under your bed tonight. Grandma hid something there yesterday. Now the police saw him as a suspect, CPS saw him as a risk, and Kathy, well, she barely saw him as human anymore. But there was someone else behind all this. Someone who'd hated him from day one. Someone who smiled only with her teeth, never her eyes. Bernice Wright. By 7 a.m., Thomas had made up his mind. He needed help. Someone who wouldn't doubt him. Someone who'd go straight into the fire with him. He called Joseph. Joseph arrived 20 minutes later, wearing basketball shorts, a hoodie, and the kind of face that looked like he already knew something terrible had happened. All right, Joseph said as he walked in without knocking. Who do I have to fight? Thomas managed a weak exhale that might have been a laugh. No fighting. Yet, Joseph froze halfway through pulling off his hoodie. The yet is concerning. Thomas sat on the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. Police found drugs under my bed. Joseph didn't blink. That's not funny. Wasn't a joke. Thomas, Joseph said slowly, lowering himself into the armchair like an old man being delivered bad news. You? You would never. I didn't. Joseph nodded instantly. Okay, good. I know. So who did? Thomas slid the folded note from his pocket and handed it over. Joseph read it once, then again, then looked up at Thomas with an expression that sharpened like a blade. Bernice. Yes. That woman, Joseph said, blowing air out of his cheeks. That woman has been trying to ruin you since Kathy met you. She wants custody of Emma, Thomas said. I think she wants to make me look unfit. No, Joseph corrected, handing back the note. She wanted to destroy you. There's a difference. He knew that. He just hadn't wanted to say it out loud. We start with her properties. Joseph was already in mission mode, pacing, tapping his fingers together. Bernice owns rental units, right? Remember she bragged about becoming a real estate queen after the divorce. Thomas nodded. Yeah, she bought 3 units in Riverside, 2 in the South End, and I think 1 in Hayward. You think she's letting criminals use her units? Joseph asked. Thomas rubbed his forehead. I don't know, but if she's willing to plant drugs in my house and risk her own granddaughter finding them, she's capable of anything. Joseph clapped his hands once. Then let's dig. They drove to Joseph's apartment, where he had a desktop computer with 3 monitors and a chair that looked like it belonged in a racing game. He cracked his knuckles dramatically before typing anything. You look ridiculous, Thomas muttered. Joseph grinned. Ridiculous is a mindset. Also, this is my hacking chair. You're not hacking. Not yet. Thomas sighed. Step 1. Property records. Joseph pulled up the county's property database. Okay, here we go, he said. Bernice Wright. Jesus, she actually is a real estate queen. On the screen appeared a list of properties. 8, not 6. She's been busy, Joseph mumbled. Thomas leaned in. Scroll. 3 in good neighborhoods. 5 in not-so-good ones. Joseph clicked on tenant records, public complaints, incident reports. 3 properties had noise complaints. 2 had suspected narcotics activity. 1 had a police call for stabbing. Thomas felt sick. She rents to anyone. No background checks, Joseph said. Probably collecting cash. Off the books. Why? Thomas asked. That's the million-dollar question. Joseph opened incident reports connected to one of the Riverside units. Something caught his eye. A name repeated. Andre Gillespie. Oh, hell, Joseph whispered. Thomas frowned. Who is that? Joseph pulled up the name in public arrest logs. Rumored distributor. Works under the table. No convictions, but plenty of police attention. Thomas stared at the monitor. And he's one of Bernice's tenants? More than that. Joseph clicked another report. Another unit, another incident. Andre again. Twice. Thomas sat back, heart sinking. This wasn't coincidence. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? Joseph asked quietly. That Bernice is connected to someone distributing drugs. Thomas's jaw tightened. And that planting some of my house wasn't random? Yes. Thomas pressed his palms against his eyes. Jesus. Joseph stood, walked to the fridge, grabbed 2 bottled waters, and tossed one at Thomas. This is bigger, man, Joseph said. This isn't just her hating you. This looks organized. Thomas felt ice forming in his chest. What if she's using her properties as safe houses or storage spots? And she planted something in my home just to what? Remove me entirely? Joseph placed a hand on his shoulder. If she wanted you out of the picture, a drug conviction would do it. You lose custody. You lose visitation. You might even lose your job. Thomas swallowed hard, and Emma would be with her. Full time. They both fell silent. The weight of that thought was suffocating. A lead they can't ignore. Joseph cracked open another window. Let's look for patterns. He built a quick map of Bernice's properties. 8 pins appeared. He added dates of reported incidents. Then he highlighted every incident connected to the same unofficial suspect. Andre Gillespie. 3 properties lit up. Same area, Joseph said. Same street radius. Same timeline. Thomas leaned back, stunned. He's tied a half of her problem units. Joseph nodded slowly. You don't just accidentally rent to the same suspected distributor 3 times in different units. Unless it's intentional. Joseph pointed at him. Exactly. Thomas stood and paced, hands on his hips. Bernice set me up. But now, I think she's involved in something criminal herself. Joseph swiveled in his chair. I think she's deeper than you realize. And if she's connected to Andre, he didn't finish. He didn't need to. Thomas's stomach dropped as the pieces clicked together. The drugs under his bed weren't planted as a prank. They weren't planted out of petty hatred. They were planted by someone connected to a criminal network. Someone who wanted him gone. Someone who had access to dangerous people. Someone wearing perfume and pearls, smiling sweetly at judges while plotting like a mobster in heels. Bernice Wright. Thomas ran both hands through his hair. This wasn't random. This wasn't even personal. Joseph looked up with a grim expression. It's part of something bigger, organized, and dangerous. Thomas exhaled slowly, eyes narrowing with a resolve he hadn't felt in years. Then we dig deeper, he said, and we don't stop until we find everything. Chapter 4, The Warehouse Discovery. Thomas had replayed the footage from Joseph's monitors in his mind all day. Bernice's properties, her tenants, the repeated appearance of Andre Gillespie. Every thread he pulled led to something darker, something intentional, something organized. By the time the sky turned charcoal and the streetlights flickered on, Thomas had already made his decision. He wasn't waiting for justice. He was going to hunt for the truth himself. And he was starting tonight. The warehouse. According to county records and Joseph's map, Bernice owned a warehouse on the outer edge of the industrial district. Supposedly, it was storage for her cleaning business, though no website or registered LLC existed for that business. At 11:42 p.m., Thomas parked his car 2 blocks away, killed the engine, and sat still long enough to steady his heartbeat. The wind was cold. The air smelled like rust and diesel, the kind of place where no one looked twice if a stranger disappeared. He pulled his hoodie up, slipped gloves on, and checked the small camera attached to the inside of his jacket. Okay, he whispered to himself. And then out. He walked slowly, deliberately, sticking to the darker corners of buildings. When he turned onto the warehouse's street, he froze. A truck was backed up to the loading dock, its engine running. Voices drifted through the night, low, hurried, not the casual tone of late-night workers. Thomas pressed himself against the side of a metal fence and peered around. The warehouse door was cracked open. Light spilled out, yellow and unwavering. He took a breath, pulled out his phone, opened the camera app, and started recording. Inside the operation, Thomas crept closer, crouching as he approached the loading dock. He made it to the side of the open door, heart in his throat, and angled his camera inside. What he saw made his stomach flip. 2 men sat at a folding table, surrounded by stacks of cash, bundled, rubber-banded, and piled like bricks. One man fed money through a counting machine, the whirring sound mixing with the low hum of the overhead lights. Another group of workers stood near a conveyor setup, packaging small bags, drugs, unmistakably, sealing them in plastic, labeling them, and dropping them into duffel bags. Duffel bags identical to the one found under his bed. Thomas swallowed hard, trying to keep his breathing quiet. His thumb steadied on the record button. "You're doing this for Emma." Workers joked to each other in tense voices. "Yo, Andre said this batch needs to be out by tomorrow. No screw-ups. Bernice want numbers updated? She gets hers after distribution. Don't ask me how much, I don't count that high." Hearing her name in a criminal operation felt like a punch to the ribs. Thomas zoomed in, capturing faces, the product, the bags, the cash, the license plate on the truck, anything that could become evidence. He edged closer, now half inside the shadow of the loading dock. The camera caught clearer shots of the men stuffing the duffel bags. Get all of it, he told himself. Everything. Enough to bury her. A loud metallic clang echoed somewhere inside the warehouse. Thomas jerked back, hitting the wall with more force than he intended. A worker looked up. "Yo, you hear that?" "Probably the pipes," another replied. "This place is ancient." Thomas stopped breathing until they went back to work. He wiped sweat from his brow, even though the night air was cold. Too close. Way too close. But he wasn't leaving. Not yet. Not without the proof he needed to save his daughter. The moment that changes everything. A new voice entered the warehouse, deep, commanding. "Move faster. We're behind schedule." Thomas recognized the tone before he saw the face. Andre Gillespie. He stepped into the light, tall, sharp jawline, wearing a dark leather jacket, and began inspecting the bags. He lifted one, unzipped it, checked the contents, then nodded to his men. "Good. Bernice wants the shipment out by sunrise." Thomas's blood ran cold. He captured every second. Andre zipped the bag closed and slapped one of the workers on the shoulder. "Load it." This was it. This was everything he needed. He backed away slowly, careful, trying not to make a sound. His heart was hammering so loudly he worried it would echo through the metal walls. Just a few more steps. His foot hit an empty soda can hidden in the gravel. It crunched. Loud. Too loud. A shadow turned. "Who's out there?" Thomas bolted. The chase. "Hey, stop." The warehouse erupted with shouts. Thomas sprinted toward the far end of the lot. Heavy footsteps pounded behind him. A flashlight beam swept past him, then back again. There! He's running toward the gate. Thomas vaulted over a concrete barrier, nearly twisting his ankle on the landing. He pushed himself forward, lungs burning. If they caught him, it was over. Not just for him, for Emma. He tore across the street, cut between two abandoned forklifts, and dove behind a dumpster. Footsteps thundered past. Breathing hard, he waited, counting the seconds, listening for the sound of someone doubling back. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the voices faded. He didn't move for 5 more minutes. When he finally crawled out, he kept low, making his way through the maze of old industrial yards until he reached his car. He didn't exhale until the engine turned over. The decision. Back in his driveway, Thomas sat in the dark, gripping the steering wheel. The video was incredible, undeniable, explosive, but it was also completely illegally obtained. If he gave it to police, it could backfire. They might accuse him of trespassing, stalking, tampering, harassment, any excuse to get it thrown out. And Bernice had money, lawyers, influence. He couldn't risk becoming a bigger suspect than she already made him look like. But he couldn't sit on this evidence either. Not while she built a case to take Emma. He opened a recording, watched the first few seconds, the drugs, the cash, the bags, and knew what he had to do. He uploaded the video to an encrypted burner app Joseph had set up for him and sent it anonymously to a major news station. No message, no explanation, just the footage. Once it's sent, he deleted everything from his phone, even the cache thumbnails. Then he stared at the blank screen, chest tight. He had just burned his safety net. He had just fired the first shot in a war he didn't fully understand. But at least now he had time. Time to figure out the rest. Chapter 5. Public outrage and the first police raids. Thomas didn't sleep the night he sent the footage. He lay awake on the couch, still in his clothes, the TV muted but glowing in the corner, waiting for some sign, anything, that the storm he had unleashed was beginning. And it came at 6:12 a.m. A notification flashed on his phone. Breaking. Anonymous footage shows alleged drug operation in local warehouse. He bolted upright. The video was everywhere. The news, social media, police scanner chatter, and comments were exploding by the thousands. Holy hell, this is in our city? Where were the police? Whoever filmed this is brave as hell. Shut that whole place down. Thomas felt his stomach drop. There was no going back now. The media firestorm. By 8 o'clock a.m., every major outlet was running the story. A reporter stood outside the exact warehouse Thomas had filmed the night before. Authorities have confirmed the footage is authentic. Police believe the warehouse may be the center of a large-scale distribution network operating throughout the county. Thomas turned up the volume. Behind a reporter, dozens of officers were visible, blocking off the area with bright yellow tape. Police SUVs and unmarked vehicles filled the lot. AK-9 units circled the perimeter. Neighbors crowded the sidewalks, filming on their phones. The reporter continued, "We have sources claiming the building owner is a woman named." Thomas held his breath. Bernice Wright. Investigators are seeking clarification on her connection to the operation. He dropped the remote. A surge of adrenaline shot through him. His heart raced. His hands trembled. She was exposed. Finally, she was exposed. The first raid. By noon, Thomas was parked 2 blocks away, watching from a distance as officers carted duffel bags, crates, and boxes filled with evidence out of the warehouse. The same bags he had seen under those harsh lights hours earlier were now being photographed, cataloged, and loaded into police trucks. Several workers were cuffed and lined up against a patrol car. One officer barked orders, "Secure everything." These are federal quantities. Thomas spotted him, Andre Gillespie, being shoved into the back of a cruiser, wrists zip-tied, jaw tight, trying and failing to hide the panic in his eyes. Andre shouted toward the officers, "Man, y'all don't know what you're doing. I didn't run this. I just moved product." "Save it for interrogation," an officer snapped, slamming the door. Thomas pressed a hand to his mouth. Seeing Andre arrested felt surreal, like watching his nightmare unravel in reverse. Andre starts talking. Hours later, the evening news took it further. A suited anchor leaned toward the camera. Sources tell us that Andre Gillespie, the man arrested during this morning's raid, is cooperating with law enforcement. Thomas froze. Cooperating? That meant, the anchor continued, Gillespie has provided investigators with names, records, and alleged financial links tying the operation to property owner Bernice Wright. Thomas let out a slow, shaky breath. There it was. He sat down heavily on the couch, feeling the weight of relief and dread hit him at once. If Andre flipped, Bernice's empire, whatever size it truly was, would begin to collapse. But that also meant Bernice would know exactly who had brought the house down. She would know someone leaked the footage, and she was on a look for the person who tipped the first domino. Thomas felt a cold chill crawl down his spine. The raid spread. By the next morning, police cars swarmed 3 more properties owned by Bernice. 2 duplexes and 1 office building. Thomas watched the live chopper feed. Every place looked the same. Officers hauling out boxes, bags, containers, computers, file cabinets. One reporter narrated breathlessly. Authorities say they are searching for documents related to money laundering, financial fraud, and potential trafficking activity. Several kilograms of illegal substances have been recovered from the second raid alone. People filmed from their porches as officers moved in. Tenants were escorted out for questioning. Some protested their innocence. Others refused to speak at all. Meanwhile, online comments exploded. "Arrest the landlord. This is a whole crime ring. How did this go on for years?" Thomas watched every update like his life depended on it. Because it did. The arrest of Bernice Wright. At 3:40 p.m., Thomas's phone buzzed again. A breaking news alert. Police arrest local businesswoman Bernice Wright in connection with multi-property drug operation. He rushed to the TV. A swarm of reporters stood outside Bernice's mansion-like home. Expensive gates, stone pillars, manicured hedges. Bernice appeared in frame. In handcuffs. She wore an expensive navy blouse, tailored pants, pearl earrings, a perfect picture of wealth and society. but her face was twisted with fury. Not fear. Fury. Officers guided her toward a patrol car as cameras flashed. Bernice snapped at someone off-screen. "This is ridiculous. You have no right. My lawyer will bury every one of you." Neighbors stood on the sidewalk, whispering. A reporter thrust a microphone forward. "Mrs. Wright, do you deny involvement in the warehouse activities?" Bernice turned her head, just enough for the camera to catch her icy expression. "I'm being framed." Thomas's skin crawled. Her eyes, he knew those eyes. Cold, calculating, vengeful, and she wasn't looking at the reporters. She looked straight into the lens, like she was aiming her rage at whoever exposed her. At him. Two officers pushed her gently into the back of the car. The door slammed. Bail and fury. The evening news confirmed it. Bernice Wright has posted bail within hours of her arrest. Of course she had. Money like hers didn't stay locked away. Thomas paced his living room, running a hand through his hair. She was free, out in the world, angrier than ever, and she had just watched her empire begin to crumble. The anchor added, "Sources close to the investigation state that prosecutors expect more charges as evidence is reviewed." Community outrage continues to grow. Many are calling this a turning point in uncovering systemic crime connected to wealthy property owners. Public anger was rising. Law enforcement was tightening the noose. Evidence was piling up. But one thing was certain. Bernice wasn't going to take this quietly. She wasn't the type to retreat. She was the type who struck back hard. Thomas swallowed, staring at the dark window as if she might appear outside at any moment. Because now she had motive. She had rage, and she had nothing left to lose. Chapter 6, Kathy breaks free in custody battle. Thomas knew the knock wasn't Bernice's when it came gently, almost timidly. Nothing like her sharp, entitled raps that always sounded like demands. He opened the door to find Kathy, trembling, eyes swollen as if she had been crying for hours. For a moment, neither of them spoke. She finally whispered, "Thomas, can I come in?" He stepped aside silently. Kathy walked in like her legs barely worked, then stood in the middle of the living room, wringing her hands so tightly he could hear her knuckles crack. "I saw the footage," she said. Just those words. Thomas swallowed. "Which footage?" She looked up at him with a face full of shame. "All of it. The warehouse video. The news. Andre. The raids." Her voice wavered. "Everything." He felt his breath catch, as if he'd been quietly waiting for this moment and also dreading it. She sank onto the couch, covering her face. "I'm so sorry," she said, voice breaking. "Oh my God, Thomas, I should have listened to you. I should have believed you." Thomas didn't sit. He leaned against the opposite wall, arms folded, heart hammering unevenly. "I told you Bernice was capable of this years ago." "I know," she whispered, "but you trusted her more than me. I know. You let her influence the divorce. You let her twist Emma against me. You let her—" "Yes." Kathy burst out, finally looking directly at him. "Because I didn't know who I was without her telling me what to do." Her voice cracked open like something raw and long-trapped had finally escaped. Thomas blinked. He had never heard her speak this honestly, not once in their entire marriage. Kathy took a shaky breath. "My mother, she controlled every part of my life. She paid my college tuition, but she reminded me every single day how I owed her. She bought our wedding rings, but then used it as leverage. After Emma was born, she controlled the child care, the finances, the doctor appointments. I thought," she swallowed, voice trembling, "I thought she just wanted to help. And now?" Thomas asked quietly. Kathy stared at the floor. "Now I know she wanted ownership." The silence between them felt heavy, but not cruel. Just honest. She wiped her eyes. "Thomas, when CPS told me what they found in your home, when they told me you lost Visitation," her voice choked. "I didn't want to believe you'd do something like that. But Mom kept telling me you were unstable, irresponsible, dangerous." She shook her head hard, and I let her get into my head. Thomas rubbed a hand over his face. "She planted the drugs in my house, Kathy. She could have put me in prison for the rest of my life." "I know." Kathy's voice turned small. "And that means she put Emma in danger too." The realization hit her visibly. a tremor running through her shoulders. She used our daughter as a tool, Kathy whispered. I can't forgive that. Thomas stepped closer, slowly. Why are you here? Kathy looked him in the eyes with a clarity he hadn't seen in years. Because Emma belongs with you, she said, and because I want to help fix what my mother tried to destroy. It took Thomas a few seconds to absorb that. She told me what she saw. Kathy continued softly. The day my mom visited your house, Emma told me, word for word, Grandma hid something in Daddy's room. I didn't understand what she meant until the police raided the warehouse. Kathy pressed her palms to her eyes. And now I can't stop thinking, if Emma hadn't warned you. Thomas exhaled sharply. I know. Kathy looked up. We need to tell the court everything. And I mean everything. The manipulation. The way she controlled my decisions. The way she tried to take Emma from you. I'm done being scared of her. Thomas nodded slowly. You ready to break away? Kathy nodded. Yes. Completely. Emergency custody hearing. 2 days later, Thomas stood in the small family courtroom, palms damp, heart pounding. CPS investigators sat in the front row. His attorney stood beside him. Across the aisle, Kathy sat alone. Notably, Bernice was not present. She was legally barred from being anywhere near the hearing due to her arrest and investigation. The judge scanned the file in front of her. Mr. Vaughn, Mrs. Vaughn, this is an emergency custody petition initiated due to evidence suggesting danger in the maternal extended household. Thomas kept his breathing steady. Kathy rose first. Her voice trembled but stayed clear. Your Honor, I need to say something before anything else. The judge nodded. Go ahead. Kathy looked at Thomas, then back at the judge. My mother manipulated me for years, she said. She influenced the divorce. She pressured me to seek more custody. She made me believe Thomas was unfit when he wasn't. And recently, her voice cracked. Recently, she endangered my daughter and framed my ex-husband for crimes he had absolutely nothing to do with. The courtroom murmured. The judge lifted an eyebrow. Are you saying you believe the defendant was framed? Yes, Kathy said firmly. She wiped her cheek. And I want the record to show that I support Thomas having full custody. Thomas closed his eyes briefly, swallowing emotion. The judge turned to CPS. Your findings? A CPS investigator stood. Your Honor, based on the drugs found in Mr. Vaughn's home, Emma's testimony, and the evidence linking these actions to the maternal grandmother, CPS strongly recommends full placement with Mr. Vaughn for Emma's safety. The judge nodded slowly. Bring in the child, please. The door opened. Emma walked in holding a small stuffed fox. Her eyes scanned the room until she spotted Thomas. She smiled nervously. The judge gave her a gentle nod. Hello, Emma. Can you tell me, in your own words, what happened the day your grandma visited Daddy's house? Emma hugged the fox tighter. Grandma came into Daddy's room. She told me to go watch cartoons. But I peeked. She swallowed. She put a big bag under Daddy's bed. And she told me not to tell Daddy. The judge leaned forward slightly. Did she say why? No, Emma whispered. But she was mad. Really mad. Kathy turned away, tears slipping down her face. Thomas felt his chest squeeze. The judge folded her hands. Thank you, Emma. That was very brave. Emma smiled shyly and walked back out with the bailiff. The judge's ruling. It took only minutes. Given the evidence presented, the ongoing criminal investigation, and the risk posed by the maternal grandmother, the court rules the following. Full physical and legal custody is awarded to Thomas Vaughn. Kathy Wright will have visitation as arranged between the parents. And lastly, the judge paused. Bernice Wright is hereby banned from all contact with Emma Vaughn effective immediately. The gavel struck. Thomas exhaled a long, trembling breath. Relief hit him so hard his knees almost buckled. Kathy approached him slowly. I meant everything I said, she whispered. I want him safe. And I know that's with you. Thomas nodded. Thank you. For the first time in years, they weren't adversaries. They were simply parents protecting their daughter from the same threat. And as they walked out of the courthouse together, there was one unmistakable truth. Bernice had lost her control, her influence, her access to Emma. Chapter 7. Life with Emma and the Decision for Justice. The first morning Emma officially moved and felt like a quiet sunrise after a year-long storm. No tension, no whispering arguments, no Bernice slamming doors or pacing hallways in those sharp heels that made the whole house feel like a battlefield. Just peace. Thomas stood in the kitchen doorway, watching Emma hum softly while unpacking her last two boxes. She moved gently, smiling to herself, her hair tied in a messy bun, wearing one of his oversized t-shirts like it was the most natural thing in the world. He hadn't realized until this moment how badly he had needed a calm home, a safe home. Emma caught him watching and smirked. "What?" she asked, hands on her hips. "You look like you're seeing a ghost." "No," Thomas replied, stepping closer. "Just trying to understand what a peaceful life feels like." She laughed, a soft, warm sound he hadn't heard in years while living under Bernice's shadow of manipulation and chaos. "Well," Emma said, tapping his chest with one finger, "get used to it. Because I'm staying, and I'm not planning on letting the house fall apart like before." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "Before? You mean when it felt like a live-in psychological warfare experiment?" Emma snorted. "Exactly." They both laughed, and for a moment, Thomas felt normal again. But underneath that warmth, a cold realization simmered. Peace didn't mean safety. Distance didn't mean the threat was gone. Bernice was still out there, with connections, with loyalists, with years' worth of secrets hidden behind her polished smile. And Thomas knew exactly how dangerous that made her. A new routine and old shadows. Days passed, and Emma settled into the house with an energy that made everything brighter. She opened windows, let sunlight in, reorganized cupboards, and even convinced Thomas to throw out a set of creepy porcelain dolls Bernice's mother once gave them. That woman had a hobby of collecting cursed artifacts, Emma muttered as she wrapped them in old newspapers. Good riddance. Thomas chuckled, but the comment stirred something heavier. Because while they were cleaning, reorganizing, and rebuilding a sense of normal life, he kept finding small remnants Bernice had purposefully hidden, old financial ledgers tucked behind books, anonymous mail addressed to random names, even burner phones taped under drawers. Emma noticed his face tighten each time. "You okay?" she asked one afternoon while they sat at the table sorting through another box labeled miscellaneous. The kind of box Bernice would have filled with things she didn't want anyone else to see. Thomas lifted a manila folder. Inside were bank transaction logs under 3 different aliases, all with ties to the same shell corporation. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I'm just remembering things." Emma touched his hand gently. "You don't have to do this alone." He met her eyes, warm, steady, sincere, and nodded. "No, but I need to finish it." Joseph returns. A few evenings later, Joseph showed up at the house again, carrying 2 laptops, a thermos of coffee, and a stack of printed documents. He dropped everything on the dining table. "This," Joseph declared, "is ridiculous." Thomas groaned. "What now?" Joseph flipped open one laptop and pointed to a map on the screen. This is a web of financial crimes spanning at least 7 years." And she hid it in plain sight. Offshore accounts, dummy corporations, fake tenants, bogus rental agreements. "Thomas, your ex-wife wasn't just stealing. She was running a small criminal empire." Emma's eyes widened. "Are you serious?" Joseph gave a humorless laugh. "Emma, half these tenants never existed. The other half were people she paid under the table for favors. Looks like she used them as fronts for laundering money she siphoned from her business, from Thomas's accounts, and from God knows where else." Thomas exhaled slowly, staring at the screen, a cold heaviness settling over him. "So, this is bigger than I thought." "No," Joseph corrected. "It's bigger than either of us thought." Emma leaned forward. "So what now?" Joseph glanced at Thomas. "He decides. The decision for justice." For the first time in weeks, the old anxiety flickered up inside Thomas. The familiar tension he used to feel every time Bernice started a new fight or disappeared for days with a flimsy excuse. Emma sensed it instantly. "Thomas," she whispered, "you're safe now. Don't let her shadow choke you." He nodded, but his eyes stayed fixed on a laptop. "Safe, yes, but free? Not until this was finished." He pushed the laptop away and stood up, pacing slowly across the living room. Bernice built all this thinking she was untouchable, he said, voice low, steady. She used my name, my accounts, my reputation. She dragged me through hell while building her little empire. Emma and Joseph stayed quiet, letting him speak. But I'm done letting her dictate my life. She chose this path. She created this chaos. She dragged me into it without my knowledge. He turned toward them. So I'm ending it. Emma's expression softened with pride. Joseph nodded approvingly. Good, Joseph said. Then we proceed. No holding back. Thomas walked back to the table, rolled up his sleeves, and pulled the laptop toward him. Let's bring everything into the light. Digging into the network. What followed became a grueling nightly ritual. Every evening after work, Thomas sat with Joseph at the dining table, surrounded by laptops, folders, scribbled notes, and cross-reference timelines. Emma kept them fed, hydrated, and occasionally sane, but she gave them privacy when things got too intense. They uncovered offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands under 4 different variations of Bernice's name. 2 shell corporations registered in Nevada with no real addresses. Payments to unidentified individuals, possibly hitmen, enforcers, or anyone willing to do dirty work. 3 rental properties Bernice claimed to manage, but each had tenants who didn't exist on public records. A storage unit paid for in cash under a fake name. Every new discovery felt like peeling back another layer of a rotten onion. One night, Joseph muttered, "How did she run all this while pretending to be an innocent, overworked wife?" Thomas didn't hesitate. She was always 2 people, the woman she showed the world, and the monster she hid behind closed doors. Emma, passing by with tea, whispered softly, "Not anymore." The quiet strength, living with Emma, gave Thomas a sense of stability he had forgotten was possible. She was patient, warm, supportive, and unlike Bernice, she wasn't trying to control him. She was helping him rebuild himself. But there was something else too. Emma's presence made him braver, more focused, more determined. Each night, when Emma placed a gentle hand on his shoulder before heading to bed, it felt like she was silently telling him, "You are stronger than your past." And he believed her, organizing the truth. By the end of the week, the dining table had transformed into a war room. Laptops on one end, stacks of documents sorted by year, a giant whiteboard filled with arrows, dates, connections, and red circles around key transactions. Thomas looked at it all, the evidence, the patterns, the lies, and felt a sense of control returning to his life. "Let's organize everything," he said firmly. Every file, every document, every timeline. He stayed up late into the night, labeling each folder, cross-referencing every transaction, creating detailed summaries, building an airtight archive of Bernice's entire criminal network. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't panicked. He was methodical. He was focused. For the first time in years, Thomas was no longer the victim of Bernice's chaos. He was the one dismantling it, and he organized all the evidence meticulously. Chapter 8, Thomas brings down the empire. Thomas had never been one to sit idle. Even with Emma finally safe at home and Kathy's acknowledgement of the truth, he knew the fight wasn't over. Bernice's reach stretched far beyond the warehouse raid and her recent arrest. Her network of shell companies, offshore accounts, and corrupt tenants could easily recover unless someone dismantled it completely. He had spent weeks meticulously organizing evidence, and now it was time to act. Delivering the evidence. Under the cover of night, Thomas carried a heavy briefcase through quiet city streets. The papers inside were organized with precision. Detailed transaction records, including wire transfers and offshore payments. Annotated property maps marking every one of Bernice's rental units and warehouses. Connections to Andre Gillespie, showing how he facilitated drug distribution. Warehouse activity logs from Thomas's own clandestine footage. Tenants' affidavits, timelines, and suspicious payments. He arrived in nondescript federal building, slipped past the security desk with a carefully crafted fake ID, and found the drop-off location specified in a secure FBI tip line email. The agent on the other side barely looked up as Thomas handed over the package. "Anonymous submission?" the agent asked. "Yes," Thomas said. "I have everything, All of it. The agent nodded curtly, sliding the briefcase under the counter. We'll handle it from here. Thomas exhaled, feeling the tension in his shoulders ease just slightly. He knew it would take weeks, maybe months, for the Bureau to process everything. But he also knew that once they did, Bernice wouldn't have room to maneuver. Applying legal pressure. While the FBI began its formal investigation, Thomas refused to wait passively. Using the evidence he had gathered, he launched a multi-front legal and public campaign against Bernice. 1. Leaks to journalists. Thomas anonymously sent summarized reports and screenshots to investigative journalists in local newspapers and online outlets. Within hours, news stories appeared detailing suspicious financial patterns linked to Bernice's properties. Headlines like "Local Landlord Linked to Multi-Million-Dollar Shell Companies" and "Warehouse Video Reveals Alleged Drug Operation" spread like wildfire. 2. Tips to the IRS. He submitted anonymous tip forms detailing Bernice's offshore accounts, hidden profits, and undeclared rental income. He included cross-references from her legitimate accounts, making it impossible to ignore. 3. Reporting unsafe building violations through city inspection departments. Thomas filed formal complaints against Bernice's properties: broken staircases, fire hazards, overcrowded units, unlicensed rental spaces. Inspectors visited quickly, issuing citations and forcing temporary closures. 4. Encouraging witness testimonies. He quietly reached out to tenants he knew had been intimidated, helping them relocate and providing moral support. Letters and statements were sent to the authorities detailing years of threats, unpaid security deposits, and other suspicious activity. 5. Exposing shell companies online. Thomas created an organized dossier connecting each shell company, showing transactions, addresses, and business partners. He made the information publicly accessible on secure whistleblower forums, ensuring it would catch journalists, law enforcement, and regulatory agencies. The empire begins to collapse. Within weeks, the results were undeniable. Thomas watched news reports and social media with a mixture of awe and grim satisfaction. Properties were seized or frozen, locked down due to outstanding violations and criminal connections. Accounts tied to Bernice were frozen by the IRS and banking institutions. Business partners, fearful of association, quietly distanced themselves, shutting down projects or resigning from boards. Journalists ran follow-up investigations, confirming connections between Bernice's shell companies and suspected criminal activity. Tenants who had once been intimidated began to speak out publicly. Thomas leaned back in his chair, a mug of lukewarm coffee in hand. The house was quiet. Emma was asleep upstairs. For the first time in months, he felt the weight of Bernice's presence lift, if only slightly. Joseph leaned against the counter, grinning, scrolling through his phone. You know, for a chemistry teacher, you're ruthless when you want to be. Thomas smirked. You mean meticulous, and patient, and anonymous, and terrifying. Joseph laughed. All of the above. Honestly, I didn't think anyone could take her down like this. Thomas's gaze drifted to the window. Across the city, Bernice's empire was unraveling piece by piece. It was slow, deliberate, and undeniably satisfying. Slow? Joseph asked, sensing the silence. I'd call it surgical. Thomas allowed himself a small smile. Surgical. That's better. Precise. Controlled. Legal. Mostly. He thought about Emma, curled up in her bed, smiling in her sleep, unaware of the chaos her grandmother had caused, and the careful, relentless work her father was doing to protect her. She won't touch her, Thomas said quietly. Not ever again. Not Emma. Not me, not this house. Joseph nodded, folding his arms. She'll be lucky to even see the city without someone watching her now. Thomas returned to his stack of papers, double-checking each folder, making sure every link, every transaction, every connection was properly noted. He added small tabs, color-coded notes, and timestamps for reference. This isn't just about revenge, Thomas said. It's about justice. And if we do it right, she won't have the power to hurt anyone else ever again. Joseph leaned in, studying the meticulous files. You've got the FBI breathing down her neck now, The IRS, journalists, city inspectors, even her tenants are scared straight. This empire's already trembling. Thomas nodded. Good. Trembling is the first step. Collapse is next. The weight of responsibility. Thomas paused for a moment, sipping his coffee. The quiet night, air settled through the open window. He thought about every sleepless night, every cautious step, every risk he'd taken, from the warehouse to the courthouse, from the spreadsheets to the secret tips. Every single action had been calculated, precise, and necessary. And yet, he felt the weight of it all. Not just for him, not just for Emma, for everyone Bernice had hurt over the years. Every tenant, every coerced worker, every family she had intimidated or manipulated. This wasn't about vengeance anymore. This was about dismantling a network that had hidden in plain sight for decades. Thomas turned back to Joseph. We're almost there. I just have to make sure it's airtight. Joseph grinned. Then let's finish organizing this empire of hers. Every detail, every connection. Thomas nodded. He opened another folder, checked transaction numbers, cross-referenced dates, and made a note on a fresh sheet. Every lead, every hint, every suspicious activity was meticulously documented. For the first time in months, he felt fully in control. Bernice's empire, built on manipulation, money, and fear, was unraveling piece by piece, brick by brick. And Thomas was holding the blueprint for its destruction. Weeks of careful work, anonymous submissions, and persistent legal pressure had created a chain reaction. The empire was crumbling. Properties seized, accounts frozen, reputation destroyed, business partners fleeing. Bernice's carefully constructed world was gone. Thomas leaned back, hands on the table, surveying the evidence like a general surveying a battlefield he had already won. Chapter 9. The Federal Trial and Sentencing. The courtroom was packed, the air heavy with anticipation. Months of investigations, raids, and anonymous tips had culminated in this moment. Bernice Wright, once untouchable, now sitting in the defendant's chair, handcuffed, face pale, but eyes blazing with fury. Thomas sat in the gallery, Emma clinging to his side, her small hand in his. He could feel her heartbeat against his ribs, rapid and nervous. Across the room, Kathy's posture was rigid, hands folded in her lap, eyes red from tears she hadn't bothered to hide. The judge entered, and the room fell silent. Bernice smirked at the cameras and reporters, a calculated, haughty smile. She tilted her head as if daring the world to challenge her. Order in the court, the judge said. We will proceed with the trial of Bernice Wright, charged with trafficking, conspiracy, racketeering, money laundering, and child endangerment. The prosecutor, a tall man with a crisp gray suit and an even sharper presence, stood. Your Honor, the evidence we will present is overwhelming. Witnesses, documents, financial records, and first-hand accounts will show a clear, deliberate pattern of criminal behavior by the defendant, aimed not only at profit, but at controlling and endangering her family and tenants alike. Bernice scoffed, whispering to her attorney, They think this is enough? I'll make them regret every word. Thomas felt a surge of anger, but kept his hands folded. He didn't move. He waited. For months he had restrained himself, meticulously building the case. And now he would let the system do its work. Emma's testimony. The first witness called was Emma. Thomas's heart clenched as she walked up to the stand, holding her stuffed fox for comfort. She looked small and fragile, but there was a spark of courage in her eyes. Emma, the prosecutor began gently. Can you tell the court what happened the day your grandmother visited your father's house? Emma swallowed but nodded. She came into Daddy's room, she said softly, and she told me to go watch cartoons, but I saw her put a big bag under his bed. She told me not to tell Daddy. Do you know what was in the bag? Emma nodded, her lips tight. It was bad stuff. Daddy called the police. It was drugs. The courtroom murmured. Thomas felt tears sting his eyes, but blinked them back. Emma was brave. Brave in a way no adult could have been. Thank you, Emma, the prosecutor said kindly. That was very brave of you. Emma returned to her seat, and Thomas gently squeezed her hand. I'm proud of you, kiddo, he whispered. Kathy's confession. Next, Kathy took the stand. Her voice quivered at first, but soon she found strength in the truth. Your Honor, I want to speak honestly about my mother's control over my life, she began. She manipulated me financially, emotionally, and psychologically for years. She influenced my decisions during my marriage, during the divorce, and even regarding Emma's custody. I did not understand the full extent of her actions until the recent raids and evidence came to light. Bernice leaned forward, eyes narrowing, lips pressing together tightly. Lies, she hissed. She's lying. Kathy ignored her, continuing. I failed to protect Emma. I trusted my mother over the truth. I now see how dangerous she was and how close Emma came to being hurt. I stand here today to tell the court the truth about my mother's manipulation. Thomas exhaled slowly, relief washing over him. Finally, someone who had been trapped under Bernice's influence was speaking freely. The evidence speaks. The prosecution began presenting documents, photos, and videos. Warehouse surveillance, property records, financial transfers, and the meticulously organized files Thomas had prepared months earlier were displayed on large screens for the jury. The duffel bags from the warehouse, the offshore accounts, the shell companies, and the connections to Andre Gillespie were all laid bare. Each exhibit was carefully narrated. Dates, amounts, transfers, and operations explained in a clear, logical sequence. Every time Bernice tried to interrupt, the judge silenced her firmly. You will have your opportunity to speak, Ms. Wright, the judge said. Not now. Thomas watched as the jurors leaned forward, taking notes, their expressions unreadable. But he could see the wheels turning. The evidence was undeniable. Bernice's reaction. Throughout the trial, Bernice alternated between haughty defiance and barely concealed rage. She whispered to her attorneys, gestured wildly when the videos played, and occasionally glared directly at Thomas. You think this will ruin me, she muttered, barely above a whisper during a recess, unaware that a court officer was nearby. Thomas ignored her. He didn't need to engage. He had already won in the most important ways. Emma was safe, and the evidence was irrefutable. The verdict. After hours of deliberation, the jury returned. The courtroom was tense, every spectator holding their breath. The judge called the court to order. Has the jury reached a verdict? The foreperson stood. We have, Your Honor. Bernice shifted in her seat, hands clenching the armrests. On the charges of trafficking, guilty, the foreperson said. Conspiracy, guilty. Racketeering, guilty. Money laundering, guilty. Child endangerment, guilty. Thomas felt a weight lift off his chest. Emma grinned slightly, her hand tightening in his. Kathy let out a long breath, tears slipping freely down her cheeks. Bernice's face contorted, disbelief and fury warring in her expression. She rose abruptly, shouting, This is a miscarriage of justice. I'll appeal. You'll all regret this. The judge banged the gavel. Order in the court. The defendant will be sentenced according to federal guidelines. The sentence. The prosecutor outlined the recommended sentence, taking into account the severity of Bernice's crimes and the overwhelming evidence. The judge's voice was steady, final. Bernice Wright for trafficking, conspiracy, racketeering, money laundering, and child endangerment. This court sentences you to 20 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole for 15 years. Bernice screamed, struggling against the officers restraining her. No, you can't do this. I'll appeal. She was dragged from the courtroom, still screaming, red-faced, and furious, promising retribution that Thomas knew she would never carry out. Thomas exhaled slowly, his hands trembling just slightly from the adrenaline and relief. He looked down at Emma, who squeezed his hand and whispered, We did it, Daddy. Yes, kiddo, Thomas said, his voice tight with emotion. We did it. The courtroom emptied slowly, and Thomas allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. Bernice's reign of manipulation, intimidation, and crime had ended. The truth had prevailed. Chapter 10, Peace, Reflection, and New Life. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen window, falling on the wooden table where Thomas and Emma sat together. A plate of scrambled eggs, toast, and fruit lay between them, untouched for a moment as Thomas watched his daughter giggle at something small and silly she had said. For For the first time in years, the sound felt like it belonged in his house. Not forced, not fragile, but entirely natural. "Dad," Emma said, pointing to the orange juice. "I can pour my own juice now." Thomas laughed, leaning back in his chair. "All right, but no splashing, okay?" Emma's face broke into a mischievous grin. "No promises." She carefully tilted the jug, spilling a few drops, but she caught herself before disaster struck. Thomas shook his head, smiling, and reached across to wipe a drop from her cheek. "You're getting too good at that, kiddo. One day, you'll be better than me at everything." Emma giggled again, the sound echoing through the quiet house. Life slowly settles. The days that followed were filled with small victories and moments of genuine peace. Emma's laughter became a constant companion, echoing through the halls instead of the tense silence that had ruled for so long. She no longer flinched at sudden sounds or locked doors when Bernice came into her mind. Thomas started taking her on short walks after school, hand in hand, past the park where she had once clung to him nervously during custody exchanges. They played catch, tossed a frisbee, and even built a small tree house in the backyard together. Each day, the house felt warmer, more alive, more theirs. At night, Thomas sometimes sat in the living room after Emma had gone to bed, staring at the dim glow of the streetlights outside. He'd recall the months of chaos, the police raids, the courtroom battles, and the long nights compiling evidence. The adrenaline had faded, but the weight of it all still lingered in his chest. Joseph had stopped by frequently, always bringing coffee and checking in. "She's thriving," Joseph said one evening, watching Emma chase their dog, Max, around the yard. "You did good, Thomas. You really did." Thomas nodded slowly, sipping his coffee. "We both did, but sometimes I wonder, did I go too far?" Joseph raised an eyebrow. "Too far? You exposed a criminal empire. You protected your kid. You followed the law mostly. Far? No. Necessary? Absolutely." Thomas exhaled, letting the tension ease slightly. "Necessary, yeah. I just want to make sure Emma's life never becomes about fear again. Kathy becomes a healthier co-parent. With Bernice behind bars, Kathy's own transformation became evident. She called more regularly, her tone calmer, more balanced. She showed up on time for visitation, helped with Emma's school projects, and no longer deferred every decision to her mother's whims. One afternoon, Thomas answered the phone. "Hey, Kathy." "Hi, Thomas," she replied, voice light. "Emma wanted to ask if she could go to the museum this weekend. I already checked with you on the schedule, but I thought we could coordinate." Thomas smiled, a genuine warmth filling his chest. "Of course. That sounds perfect. Thanks for checking in." I'm really sorry for everything before," Kathy added quietly. "I didn't see clearly back then. I let my mom manipulate both of us." "It's okay," Thomas said firmly. "The important thing is you're here now, co-parenting properly. Emma deserves that, and so do we." Kathy's sigh was soft, relieved. "Thank you. I'm learning. I really am." Thomas reflects on the past. Late one evening, Thomas sat in his favorite chair with a glass of whiskey, staring at the ceiling as memories of the past year flickered in his mind. The duffel bag under his bed, the frantic calls to 911, the police raids, Emma's note, Kathy's tearful confessions, Bernice's courtroom outbursts. Every moment felt surreal. He questioned himself often. Had he acted rashly? Had he endangered himself or others by taking matters into his own hands? Yet, as he thought through each step, he realized he had done what had to be done. Bernice had tried to destroy him, to take Emma, to manipulate and intimidate everyone in her path. She had underestimated the very people she thought she controlled: Thomas, Emma, even Kathy. In the end, it was her own greed, pride, and cruelty that destroyed her. Every property seized, every account frozen, every partner fleeing, it had all crumbled under the weight of her actions. And Thomas, quietly but deliberately, had ensured that truth prevailed. Emma's growth and joy. Morning routines became moments of connection rather than tension. Thomas and Emma cooked together, experimented with small chemistry experiments in the kitchen. Nothing dangerous, just vinegar and baking soda volcanoes or colored liquid reactions. One evening, Emma climbed onto Thomas's lap as he read aloud from a storybook. "Daddy," she said, looking up at him, "I like our house now. I like our life. No scary grandma." Thomas hugged her tightly. "I like it too, kiddo. More than you know." She grinned, teeth sparkling in the lamplight. "And I don't have to hide things from you anymore." "No hiding," Thomas agreed. "We're a team. Always." Her small hand squeezed his, and in that moment, Thomas felt the full measure of his success. Not in money or legal victories, not in newspapers or courtrooms, but here, in a peaceful, loving home. A new perspective. Thomas began to allow himself small pleasures again. Evening walks with Emma, quiet reading sessions on weekends, even laughter without an underlying tension. One night, while tucking Emma into bed, he paused at the doorway. She looked up at him, eyes wide and trusting. "Good night, Daddy," she whispered. "Good night, Emma," he replied softly. "Sleep tight." As he closed the door and leaned against it for a moment, Thomas allowed himself a rare smile. For the first time in years, he felt truly at peace. The nightmares that had haunted him, the fear of losing Emma, the terror of being framed, the anger at Bernice, had faded into memory. Bernice had tried to destroy him. She had tried to steal his daughter. But instead, she had destroyed herself. And Thomas had ensured that justice was served. A safe, loving home. In the weeks that followed, Thomas focused on building stability. Emma's laughter became the soundtrack of their lives. The home was no longer a battleground, but a sanctuary. Kathy's co-parenting provided balance and support, and Thomas found strength in both the routine and the quiet moments of joy. He sometimes reflected on the journey. The fear, the anger, the long nights spent planning and strategizing. And he realized, with a quiet certainty, that he had done everything right. He had not acted out of vengeance alone, but out of necessity, out of love, and out of a commitment to truth and justice. His reward was simple, yet profound. A life with Emma that was safe, nurturing, and free from the shadow of Bernice's cruelty. A life where mornings were filled with giggles, afternoons with learning and play, and nights with peace. Thomas stood by the window one evening, looking out at the quiet street, Emma asleep upstairs, and felt a sense of calm settle deep into his chest. He knew the road had been long, dangerous, and exhausting, but the destination had been worth every step. He smiled, a true, unburdened smile. Bernice's empire had fallen. The court had delivered justice, and Emma was safe. For the first time in years, Thomas felt complete. His reward was the life he had always wanted. A safe, loving home with his daughter, and justice finally served.